Hello, everybody. Hello. My name is Constable Pearl. I'm the Commissioner of Cultural Affairs of New York City and the co-chair of the Mayor's Commission on Art, Monuments, and Markers. And I'm joined here with my co-chair, Darren Walker. And I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction. We have a bunch of our commissioners here huddled on the side. We'll move the table out in a minute. But in order to see the PowerPoint, we've asked them to stand aside. They're going to introduce themselves momentarily. I wanted to just give a couple of notes on access. We have the testimony, once it gets started, will be up these stairs here. If you are, for those who cannot use the stairs, we have wireless mics. And we have wheelchair compatible seating up in front. Also, we will have CART running. It's not running yet, but we're going to have transcription. And so if you want that, if somebody needs CART but can't see it, we have a couple of iPads for access. Okay, you again, everybody, for coming. I'm going to run through a little bit of a slideshow to say sort of where we're at and what the commission is and what kind of work we've been doing so far. So this is a public hearing. Obviously, we're having one of these in each borough. We've had 2, and we have 2 more coming up. We're right in the middle of this process. We wanted to say just at the very beginning to sort of remind everybody in a way that controversies over monuments is not a new thing in New York City. So just in front of City Hall down the street here, there was a work of art commissioned, and it was called Civic Virtue, and it was controversial even by the time it was put up in the 1922. It remained controversial, actually got moved to City Hall, or to Borough Hall in Queens, and then out to Greenwood Cemetery. So it's these kind of conversations, these kind of controversies have been going on for a long time. This is nothing new, and this is also a national discussion. There's been stuff going on in the South. If you see the work on the left, that's the Robert E. Lee Monument in Charlottesville. On the right, and again, I apologize for it's kind of washed out, but the picture is of a sculpture of Mayor Rizzo in Philadelphia, which has become controversial. So this is going on in a lot of different cities. It is not unique to New York, nor is it unique to our particular moment in time. So because of that, the mayor formed this commission, and we invited Darren to co-chair and invited our commissioners. And the charge of the commission is an advisory commission on city art monuments and markers. Will advise the mayor on issues surrounding public art and historic monuments and markers on city-owned property. By the end of the year, the commission will propose non-binding guidelines to advise how the city should address monuments seen as inconsistent with the values of New York City. So just to say what a monument and a marker is, a monument on the left side of the screen, you see a monument to Joan of Arc, and on the right is a marker. It's a name of a park in Queens, which was named after a very popular educator around 75 years ago. So, and then to understand this process, we have a commission. The commission is going to make recommendations. Those commissions are handed over to the administration, to the mayor, etc. And that will be mayoral policy. So this will be a set of policies that are put in place to address issues in the future. Those policies will then, if there's a particular marker, let's say it's on Parks Department property, the Parks Department will make a recommendation about that work. And let's say there's some change that happens to the work, recontextualization or moving or whatever, and it still goes through the regular process, which is to go to a community board hearing and then to the Public Design Commission. We have the head of the Public Design Commission here. He'll introduce himself in a minute and say exactly what the Public Design Commission is. But just to be clear, there's this commission and there's the Public Design Commission. That's been in place since the late 19th century, and that is the final process. Okay? So we also wanted to just say, again, that this sort of discussion is going on all over this country. Here are some of the cities that are doing this same kind of process right now. And then we want to just give you a little insight about what we're talking about in the commission. There are words that keep coming up over and over again in our discussions, and again, frankly, in the discussions we've been having with you in the public. And these have to do with historical accuracy, participation. You know, what is the participatory aspect? We have a participatory moment right here. Well, how does that fit into it? Inquiry into power, complexity. But also, I just wanted to ask now my co-chair, Darren Walker, to talk about some of the basic values that the commission has been working with. I'm going to turn this computer on so you can see it.
So good morning, everyone. So I think for the commission, as we begin our deliberations, we decided that it would be important to craft a set of principles that should guide our conversations and ultimately the set of recommendations we make. And these guiding principles are for, first, inclusion. The notion that New York City is an inclusive city. Unlike many of the other places where we're seeing conversations in this country, New York has always been a city that is an inclusive city, that welcomes people. And so we want people to feel comfortable and feel welcome in our public spaces. A historical understanding. And that really for us is a respect for and an in-depth understanding understanding of the nuances and in fact the contradictions of our history, and to not seek to in any way misrepresent history. Complexity, the notion that our history is complex. Our layered intersectional identities as New Yorkers is complex. And finally, that we need to reckon power. Power is in many ways manifest in the very idea of a statue, something on high, something that we are looking up to, something that we are admiring, respecting, idolizing, and that we need to understand that statues have been used to exert and as a manifestation of power. And we want to just put that into the larger context. Thank you. I'm giving it back to you, I think.
Thank you very much. And we just have a couple more slides that we're going to be, oh, I'm sorry. We can, sorry. I don't think we actually have the possibility of doing much with the lights. Okay. So, just to say, the way that this has been discussed a lot in the press, etc., has been pretty much all or nothing. Like, what goes up and what stays up and what comes down. And we just wanted to say that there's a lot of other possibilities besides simply something stays or something goes. And I just wanted to give a couple of examples around the country. For example, there could be an art intervention or an artistic project. An artist named Edgar Hepworth has been doing a project for years that simply is signs that say, here's the nation that resided in this particular place historically. There are other monuments that could be added. There's a picture up of Harriet Tubman up in Harlem. It's a work that was commissioned for that great architect of the Underground Railroad. There are different kinds of temporary things that can happen as well. There's a great artist in residence at the Department of Sanitation who has done amazing work around giving credit to the sanitation workers of New York City. And one of the things she did was create a sanitation truck covered with mirrors. So it drives through the city. I don't know if anybody's seen it. And you see your reflection in it. So it's a way of saying to sanitation workers, thank you. This is what she's often said to, for your great service to New York City. But also the reflection, like that garbage inside there is your garbage. See the reflection in the truck. That is some kind of a reflection on the great work that sanitation workers do. So that's another kind of monument. There can be different kinds of new institutions. There's the Museum of Jewish Heritage downtown, which really calls itself a monument to the Holocaust. That is an institution related to the history. There are educational programs. We've been talking to DOE about how curriculums could teach history and using monuments to teach history, etc. And then finally, there can be also temporary artworks that just simply give voice to people. There's an artist who did a project where he asked people to speak and then put their words up in large, like if we did a project today with this audience and your testimony was put up in huge words in public, that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to say, it's not just an all or nothing proposition. There are many other kinds of options which are temporary works or permanent works or counter institutions, etc. Okay, the hearing format is a traditional hearing format. We're going to sit down now and you guys are going to be talking to us for the next several hours. If you haven't yet signed up, we have a sign up for testimony. Testimony will be 3 minutes long. We'll have a timekeeper which will right over here, you'll be able to see clearly how much time you have left. And then there will be a very unsubtle, very loud beep. Will say that your time is up, and then really a sentence or two after that is, we hope, just wrap it up at that point. If you have testimony that you want to hand to us and give to the commissioners, Nadia over here can take your testimony, we'll copy it, we'll give it out to the commissioners. So if you have written testimony, you can do that as well. Okay, have I missed anything, my folks? What's that? Online survey, yes. Oh, okay, by the way, there's 2 more coming up. You can go online to nyc.gov/monuments commission. And we wanted to say that there is an online survey. We've already gotten a couple of thousand people have sent in their opinions. And that is, again, at that same website, nyc.gov/monumentscommission. So with that, we move the table over. Our commissioners will sit down, and we're going to have our commissioners introduce themselves. So let's go out on stage. Okay, if we can start down at the chairs. Okay, as Gonzalo gets himself ready, why don't you, Justin, if you could start. We're going to have the commissioners introduce themselves.
I'm Justin Moore. I am an urban designer by background and expertise, and I serve in the mayor's office as the executive director of the Public Design Commission. The Design Commission is formerly known as the Art Commission, and it's the city agency that has the jurisdiction over the design of our public realm, public buildings, art on city property. So our 11-member commission, they have different backgrounds. It's an interdisciplinary body, architects, artists, etc., that they review the design, and that includes the alteration or potentially removal of public art, and including monuments and markers.
Thank you. Go back to Gonzalo.
Gonzalo Casals. I've been working in museums for over 2 decades. I'm currently the director of the Leslie Loman Museum for Gay and Lesbian Art, and I also teach arts, culture, and public policy at Hunter College.
My name is Audra Simpson. I'm a professor of anthropology at Columbia University. I'm a scholar of indigenous politics and history, along with settler colonial societies. I'm currently writing a book on the relationship between governance and affect in settler societies, and I'm a Mohawk from Ganawake.
Hi, I'm Harriet Senny. I direct the master's program in art history and museum studies at City College. I teach at the Graduate Center. I've written a couple of books on public art, one on memorials, one on controversy. And after the last election, I started an initiative called Teachable Monuments as a possible way of embedding monuments in school curricula and enabling us to have a conversation that will cross the so-called silos. Obviously, that's become much more urgent in recent times.
Good morning. My name is Mabel Wilson. I'm a professor of architecture at Columbia University. I'm also the associate director of the Institute for Research in African American Studies. And the focus of my practice, which is both scholarly and design, looks at African American culture, race, and the built environment. Most recently, I've published Begin with the Past, which is building the Smithsonian's National African American Museum. And I'm currently on a design team that's designing the memorial for enslaved laborers at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville.
Good morning. I'm Darren Walker, and I serve as president of the Ford Foundation. I also chair the National Trust for Historic Preservation's African American Heritage Fund, which is committed to recognizing historic markers and memorials and monuments in recognition of African American history, heritage, and culture in the United States.
Thank you. I already introduced myself. I'm the Commissioner of Cultural Affairs. My name is Tom Finkelpearl, but I also would say that I do have a background in public art. I wrote a book called Dialogues in Public Art, so I have thought a lot about it over the years, and very happy to be co-chairing this commission. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Sean Cavalli. I'm the Executive Vice President for the Wildlife Conservation Society. I'm also the Chair of the Cultural Institutions Group. I haven't said this often, but I am also a second-generation Italian-American. My parents were immigrants. And one of the things that I'm most proud of, and I think my parents are proudest of, is that I was knighted by the President of Italy for my efforts and the efforts of our community to promote strong U.S.-Italy dialogue.
My name is Jack Chen. I'm a professor at New York University. I'm a historian, curator, focus a lot on Chinatown and the history of the Chinese Exclusion Act. In fact, the only reason I was born was because of the Chinese Exclusion Act, but that's a longer story. I've also looked a lot at the history of the Lower East Side and the communities that have been actually missing and disappeared from history, including their archives and stories. So the questions that we're raising here are actually very important to me. I'm a co-founder of the Museum of Chinese America and also very much concerned about public studies and public history and public humanities.
Hello, my name is Michael Arad. I'm an architect practicing here in New York City. Very interested in the shared public realm that we have, and I was fortunate to design the 9/11 memorial at Bowman.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Nadia, I have the first three. Thank you very much. So we're going to call people up in threes. What's that? Okay. And we'll just start on top. Okay. So, Connor Tomas, Savonia Bailey McLean, and Yates McGee, if you could come up. You are the first panel, and you'll be speaking in that order, if you can hear. Okay, we'll just go left to right here. And again, you're going to have 3 minutes. The timer is right there. Okay, so can speak right into the microphone, please.
Your left or my left?
You're I'm saying you're first, yes. And again, if you bring the mic right up.
Good morning to this commission.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We could start the clock over again. There's one other thing I'm supposed to say. So the hearing format is we don't want to have people clapping or booing or anything like that. If you want to express your appreciation, the tradition is to do the clap like that. That's acceptable completely. But again, please no exclamations or clapping. Thank you very much. Okay, you're up.
Good morning. My name is Connor Tomas Reed. My parents were born and raised in the Bronx by their Puerto Rican and Irish immigrant families. I've lived in New York for over half of my life. I teach writing composition at the City University of New York to a majority working class Black, Latinx, Asian, and Middle Eastern student body. With my students, colleagues, and neighbors, I explore how the city is socially composed on a daily basis by the actions of the people in it, over time and across different relations of power. We then compose text to reflect and further shape these social dynamics. Nothing is set in stone. The city changes according to what we do within it. We're gathered here so that this Commission on City Art, Monuments, and Markers can hear suggestions from the diverse peoples of New York. I wish to register opposition to 3 particular monuments that should be permanently removed immediately. The Christopher Columbus statue in Columbus Circle, the Theodore Roosevelt statue outside the American Museum of Natural History, and the J. Marion Sims statue in Central Park. These 3 monuments serve as daily reminders of colonialism, indigenous genocide, and white supremacist eugenics. That they are familiar landmarks in the city shows just how much we have inured ourselves to the horrors that they celebrate. Multiple organizations that comprise the diverse peoples of New York have demanded the removal of these 3 statues. The American Indian Community House, Black Youth Project 100, Chinatown Arts Brigade, Decolonize This Place, Eagle and Condor Community Center, New York Stands with Standing Rock, South Asia Solidarity Initiative, and more. I am proud to count my students, colleagues, and neighbors among them. In the process, we have composed proposals and artistic interventions for alternative monuments to take their place. We have acted with the shared belief that no bigotries are set in stone. Our efforts to intervene in the symbolic power of our city's monuments occur in a broader national context, whose political winds suggest that New York City is far behind the rest of the country. Dozens of cities have changed the name of Christopher Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. Even though we have amassed a petition with almost 20,000 signatures to do the same here, the mayor has so far ignored this appeal. In Durham, Baltimore, and other cities, denizens and city officials have removed similar racist statues. In a time of rising white supremacist violence from Charlottesville to the White House, this commission's recommendations towards restorative justice can positively alter our city as well as the broader directions of the country. In this pivotal moment, does the commission and mayoral officials who gathered here want to be remembered as a group that dedicated public time and resources to apply cosmetic changes, or at worst, did nothing at all? Or can this commission and mayor's office set a brave precedent by urging that our city's monuments commemorate the best of our communities and not their worst? If the commission and mayor's office make the peaceful removal of these despicable monuments impossible, then you make their forceful removal inevitable. Let's start this healing process with the removal of the Columbus, Roosevelt, and Sin statues. Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Savannah Bailey McLean, and I am the Executive Director and Chief Curator for the West Harlem Art Fund, a small public arts organization that will celebrate its 20th anniversary this January. Thank you for allowing me to testify. As we examine the creation and importance of public monuments, we need to refer back to the city beautification movement and Gilded Age in New York City. The motivations at that time was to address overcrowded tenements, increased immigration and migration of poor and displaced populations from rural America. Many at that time believed such populations were decaying the moral fabric of this city. Then there was the fear of American cities of receiving second-class status to European cities. More parks and public plazas were developed to inspire or enliven the masses and bring some social order. But to whose real benefit did they really, satisfy? The wealthy class was never very concerned with inclusion. Fostering their own belief systems was really paramount. Yet, in spite of these limiting views, our public monuments should not be destroyed or simply hidden away. A broader narrative that befits more accurate data must be developed. And I have these recommendations to present to the committee. One, broaden the definition of public art that's fitting to the 21st century. That includes sound, flora, digital, and interactive installations as a part of that definition. And educate the public to this broadened definition, which is more democratic. Two, rotation of some permanent sculptural works that seem to be very offensive to museum grounds, private plazas, and botanical gardens, to help tell a broader narrative that is more historically accurate and allows space for new public art. Three, more interagency cooperation to approve more permanent public art, which includes parks, bridges, viaducts, tunnels, and abandoned structures along our waterways like pilings, old piers, and buildings. Half the time it seems like citizens are fighting their own city to realize public benefits. Three, increase resources for conservation of permanent public art. That also includes digital archiving, online exhibitions, and even virtual reality. And if there were more agency cooperation, more of this could be realized. 2% for public art. I think it's time that we have that. Offer corporate incentives to fund public art like Fearless Girls. Strongly encourage educational institutions to display a portion of their holdings. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, hi, I'm Yates McKee. I'm a historian of modern and contemporary art. I recently published a book about the kind of issues of public art in the aftermath of the Occupy Wall Street and Black Lives Matter movements. I am also a teacher of art history in the CUNY system, and I'm also a parent of 2 kids. And I mention that because what's at stake with how we engage monuments is not just preserving a fixed and frozen past, but inventing a dynamic and living future guided by principles of justice and restoration. I want to ask the panel to be courageous. The solutions about addending and adding and various kinds of compromise formations, I'm not sure if that speaks to the moment that we're in. Grace Lee Boggs used to say, what time is it on the clock of the world? Are we at a time on the clock of the world where putting a cue card on a monument or putting a plaque make sense? Is that what we're talking about? In a moment of Charlottesville and Trump, the way in which dynamics of white supremacy and settler colonialism and patriarchy are more evident than ever. So far from erasing history, so in asking you to be bold, I want to really encourage you on this principle of removal. Far from erasing history, removal is a way of making history. Removal is not merely negative, it is creative. It opens up space physically and symbolically. And speaking as a historian and educator, I can say that the art historical significance of these works that have been recently targeted will be amplified tenfold if they're removed, rather than if they're left to stand there with an anemic plaque or whatever it may be. So I understand that there's already at these commissions been discussions around the Sims and the Columbus Monument. I want to echo Connor's point about I agree those should be removed, along with the Teddy Roosevelt statue in front of the American Museum of Natural History. For decades, that has been the subject of public grievances by the American Indian movement, by Black Lives Matter, even by an artist like David Hammonds, who recreated the work inside MoMA with a police barricade around it in a show called Public Enemy. I want to leave you with this image. When a group called Decolonize This Place did an anti-Columbus Day tour at that museum last month, issuing demands for the replacement of Columbus Day by Indigenous Peoples Day, an overhauling of the museum and a removal of that monument, the museum was very accommodating to this unofficial tour. The city, however, brought out 100 police officers of all different units, of TARU squads, of surveillance cameras, of everything, guarding that monument. There's also a barricade around the Columbus Monument. A city who has to protect its monuments from its own inhabitants, there's a problem there. If these aren't removed, that is going to haunt the city forever and ever. Those are going to be constant points of antagonism, and who knows what else.
Thank you. Our next three is Phil Foglia, Stacy Shaw, and Gabriel Porter. Is Stacy here? Stacy, S-H-U-D, Stacy? If not, we can replace her. Okay, we go on. Judy, is it right? Yes, okay, you're up. Okay. So take a seat, please, and then we'll start with, I presume you're up.
I am.
Okay.
Good morning.
Judy. Yes.
My name is Phil Foley. I'm counsel for the Italian American Legal Defense and Higher Education Fund. We are part of 50 groups that demonstrated this past Saturday at Columbus Circle over the disrespect that has been displayed by people opposing the Columbus statute and, quite frankly, by the formation of this commission. Italian Americans, and I'm one proud Italian American, have long celebrated Columbus Day, nearly 100 years in peace. And Columbus was chosen as someone who we march under his rubric because he was an American icon. He was an American icon that is now represented by the fact that there are 54 cities, towns, and counties that are named after him. One of the largest rivers in our nation is named after Columbus, not to mention Columbia University, our space shuttle, and various other aspects of our life. Italian Americans feel very directly disrespected by this, and it's easy to see why. We have a history of anti-Italianism in this country that is as violent as any other community, starting with the largest mass lynching in this country, the Sacco and Vanzetti case, the internment of Italian Americans during World War II, and most recently discrimination against Italian Americans at the City University of New York, where 42 professors were discriminated against and had to be vindicated by a federal lawsuit. The Italian American response to this discrimination has been one of perseverance and respect for our country. During World War II, while we were being interned, get this number right, 1.2 million Italian Americans served in the military, 18 of whom are awarded the Medal of Honor. Joe DiMaggio's father lost his business and was forced to leave San Francisco. What was his response? He joined the Army. That's the kind of respect that Italian Americans have for this country, yet we are now being told by people who don't understand New York values that somehow this should be compromised and our holiday and our statute should be disrespected. This is an outrage to our community. We're incredibly upset by it, and it won't be tolerated. For 100 years, we've celebrated peacefully. If you want to see New York values, come to any borough in this city during Columbus Day, and you'll see people peacefully celebrating their culture and heritage with pride. And for anyone to suggest otherwise is disrespectful to us and lacks civility. One of the things I learned growing up is you don't tell other people who they should respect and who they should idolize. This is an American icon, Columbus. He's a worldwide icon. And this is the ultimate disrespect being shown to Italian Americans.
Thank you. Gabriel?
My name is Gabriel Koren. I'm a sculptor. A few years ago, I had the honor.
You got to speak right into the mic. Yeah, sorry about that. Can we start it over? Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
My name is Gabriel Koren. I'm a sculptor. A few years ago, I had the honor to win 2 public competitions in New York City. This is how I was able to create the life-size bronze sculpture of Malcolm X at the Shabbat Center and the 8-foot bronze sculpture of Frederick Douglass on the corner of Central Park. Both cases, my work was part of a collaboration with other artists. I only made the sculpture. Other artists made other artwork in the same location. Yesterday morning, I was at the Brooklyn meeting on public monuments, but unfortunately, I had to leave early. I feel very lucky because I was able to hear a young African-American lady who was asking several times, where are the monuments of the people who were kidnapped from our land? And where are the monuments for African Americans whose sweat, blood, and tears built this country? David Hammons, one of our great artists who received the Genius Award, had a great artwork at the Whitney Museum several years ago, which I never forget because it expresses what I feel when I see many of the public monuments which are honoring slave owners and mass murderers. In this artwork is in a very big room, it was in the Whitney. There was a huge cube which was covered with 8 feet tall cube, which was covered with photograph of the sculpture which is standing in front of the National Museum of American History. Theodore Roosevelt is sitting on a high horse, and both sides there is a happy slave and the happy Native American is standing next to the master. David Hammons placed packages of dynamite all around the sculpture with all sides. I never forget this work because this work expresses how I feel when I see the slave owner sculptures all over the city and our country. Having said that, I believe that there is not one solution fits all. I have 3 proposals. One is most offensive sculptures, monuments should be removed to a museum with a proper explanation what they did and why they removed from their location. 2, we cannot whitewash history. We cannot whitewash history and remove all the offensive sculptures. This is why I recommend. Can I finish recommend?
Yes, if you could wrap up. Thank you.
Yeah. This is why I recommend a very big visible sign near all those sculptures, big broad sign, so to explain to the public why they are offensive and explaining why they're offensive.
Okay.
And the third one is most importantly, I recommend new public works.
Okay.
The works and which are reflecting African Americans, the Native Americans, the Puerto Ricans.
Okay, thank you very much.
Those contribution was ignored until today.
Thank you. Yes, next is Judy.
Judy Richheimer, writer and tour guide. Thank you for holding this conversation. We need to look squarely in the eye the history of our nation and of our city, and then represent those histories with honesty and intelligence, at least. And to those requirements, I would add artistry, too. Now, the trick is to keep the conversation going after the work of the commission is done. Several suggestions. Regardless of the compromised reputations of the people being honored, do not tear down their monuments. That removal just ends the conversation in the same way that a secret, out-of-court settlement does little to prevent some future and similar wrongdoing from taking place. Instead, add signage around the monuments, comparable in layout and quality to that erected by the Downtown Alliance and the Bryant Park bid. The text would outline two versions of the lives being honored. The one we had thought was canonical, and another provided to us by more recent scholarship and insight into history. Two, with the thought in mind that sometimes the spoken rather than the written word carries more weight, let's give tours, sponsored by the city, perhaps twice a year, that would bring groups, and into perpetuity, that would bring groups free of charge to the monuments honoring controversial people. Taking a more in-depth approach than signage can, the guide would address the history and aesthetics of the monuments themselves and give a broad understanding, the good, the bad, and the ugly, of the figures being honored, which would include a discussion of the societies that shape the lives of the honorees. Of course, employ for those tours only licensed guides, licensed by the City of New York. Finally, as Abigail Adams said, remember the ladies, and, say I, the female hellraisers too. In Manhattan, we have but 11 public sculptures of women whose names are not civic fame, memory, or the like. And 7 of those sculptures depicting real women are really small. So while it's cheering that full-scale statues of Shirley Chisholm, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Susan B. Anthony are in the works, please someone add to that list Bella Abzug and Frances Kelsey, known for preventing thalidomide from being marketed in the US. Place her across from the New York Academy of Medicine as a kind of rebuke to the problematic Marion Sims, remembering that it is always better to add to history than to erase the parts of it that make us squirm.
Okay, thank you. Our next panel is Diane Prater, Joseph Gagliardo, and Alan Singer. Okay, we'll go in this direction and Fred.
My name is Diane Prayer. I'm a filmmaker and the founder and director of American Indian Artists Incorporated, also known as Amarinda. We're the only organization serving the tribally enrolled Native American arts community in New York City. I'm also from Osage and Cherokee Nation, and I grew up on Osage Nation in Oklahoma, but I'm also a New Yorker too. The current movement to emphasize, also I'd like to say that I come now to speak on behalf of the board of directors in the organization, and not for all Native people, but for tribal enrolled artists, and also not for other unaffiliated indigenous groups. The current movement to emphasize the destroying or removal of the Columbus statues
may be a well-meaning gesture for some, but for some using the action as an activist political statement is actually only pretext of not offering offending tribally enrolled Native Americans. It is symbolic and in some ways hollow. Those in the tribally enrolled Native American grassroots community in New York should be honored with equitable treatment by city institutions relative to current political issues involving preserving their present-day legacy and culture in New York City. Pulling down statues in the name of political correctness does not compensate for actual current political mistreatment and discriminatory treatment. In conclusion, Amarina's position is that it acknowledges the fact that Italian American people have faced discriminatory and exclusionary laws and in fact have been the victims of lynchings and many other attacks. And as such, they have the right to parade and to celebrate their heritage and history in the city with great pride, as any group should have that privilege. It should be mentioned that some scholars have mentioned that Christopher Columbus may not have in fact even been Italian, but possibly Catalonian, in which case the so-called honors have been going to the wrong man for many years. In addition, the mere removal of the statue as well as the designation of any kind of plaque or alternative monument merely mentioning the Native American Holocaust in the Western Hemisphere is not sufficient. But these actions should be supported by actual real-life actions that speak to the redressing of real-life current issues and discrimination that is being perpetrated against Native Americans in New York City today. Thank you.
Joseph.
Yes. Good morning. My name is Joseph Guayado. I am the President of the National Council of Columbia Associations of Civil Service. I represent 110,000 Italian Americans in civil service across the United States, but primarily inside of New York City. We protect your streets, we serve our citizens, and we do it with pride. We did not make riches, we're not famous, we're just normal people doing day-to-day work and representing the city of New York in an everyday way. This removal of statues of any sort, to believe that today and now is the time in history where we're smarter than anybody that has come before us or anybody that will come, is just wrong. It is a great divide, and it's a great divide between cultures and heritages. Italian Americans made Christopher Columbus, because it was accepted by America, part of our family. We weren't taught that he was great, we were taught that he was a voyager. He took the same voyage that Italian Americans needed to take, that Italians needed to take to get away from oppression in a country that was raided, looted, and stolen from, where our goods were taken from us, by every country in Europe, including the Moors. Nobody gave us an apology, nobody gave us restitution, nobody made us a separate country within the country. We were just given a passport and told that we can leave anytime we want. We came to America and we did just that. We're proud of what we did, we're proud of what we're doing. The very important thing that we should be doing as a commission and as a people is coming together, removing this stuff. Literally, it is in stone. Removing this stuff does not do anything but create odds against cultures and heritages. This has got to stop. We need to be able to look at anything that came up in the past and understand why it was put there and why it needs to be removed. It was put there to be able to entice Italian Americans to come here. It gave us greater influence, it gave us greater power as a non-English speaking class to be able to better ourselves, and that's what we did. It was more important to us than the Statue of Liberty. Statue of Liberty that was an influence from another country. And so we should be looking at what it was that caused that monument to be built. We should be looking at why it is that we need to take it down, what it is that this country, that we're afraid of right now, and then we should put up more to be able to educate the future of every single culture, not just the people that believe that this is the time and place that we all are the smartest people that have already walked this earth or that are going to walk this earth. If we move what is literally in stone, then we are making it permanent, and we're saying that we are smarter than everybody else. Thank you.
My name is Alan Singer. I'm a historian at Hofstra University and a lifetime resident of New York City. A scale needs to be developed to decide which monuments should be taken down, and I suggest the following criteria from low to high: complicity, benefited, advocated, and criminal. And there are a number of statues and streets and parks named in New York City after the criminal. If we decide to eliminate everything, we're going to end up eliminating the name of New York City, because the Duke of York headed the Royal African Company, the leading slave traders in the 17th century. These are my recommendations. Anything named after Andrew Jackson, who advocated and committed genocide against Native Americans. The Central Park statue of James Marion Sims. We do not have a statue of Mengele in the city of New York. John Mullally Park in the Bronx was, Mullally was indicted for inciting the July 1863 draft riots, which led to the death of over 100 people and the lynching of black men in the city of New York. Central Park statue of Samuel Morse, who during the Civil War advocated for slavery and was an opponent of emancipation. Samuel Cox in Thompson Square Park. Cox argued that the United States was for whites only, and was one of the leading opponents of the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Sims murdered in the name of science. Mullally was indicted for inciting riots. Their statues have to go. Last, I propose renaming Metro Tech Commons in Brooklyn. It was the site of the former Bridge Street Amy Church. It was where Brooklynites gathered to greet the Emancipation Proclamation. It should be known as Grand Emancipation Plaza. In Brooklyn, I'm known as the rapper Reese's Pieces, so I need to end. Robert E. Lee, his Confederacy, defended slavery in U.S. history. Stonewall Jackson led the attack that drove the Union Army back. Old Hickory slaughtered Cherokee, committed genocide, not a mystery. Doc Marion Sims pursued medical whims, experiments, butchered, and enslaved black women. They were villains, not heroes, no place in our town. Time to correct history, tear those statues down. Washington, Columbus, TR2, I'd let them stay, but it's up to you. Thank you very much.
Please, enough clapping. Thank you. Okay, thank you. The next, thank you very much. The next three are Johnny Rivera, William Chidella, and Marina Ortiz. So that's, do we have, and you are Johnny Rivera, William Chidella, I guess it is, and Marina Ortiz. Okay, we have Nadia, do you have more cards? I think we only have two.
Yes, I'll bring them upstairs.
And so I'm sorry, you are William and you are Marina. So we're missing Johnny Rivera. Can I have another card, please? Thank you. Matthew Geller. Matthew, if you could just. Okay, so we'll start with Matthew and go in this direction.
Hello, I'm Matthew Geller.
Right to the.
Hello, I'm Matthew Geller. I'm an artist. I live in New York City, and I received a Department of Cultural Affairs Percent for Art public art commission 6 years ago for an artwork to be installed in the New Myrtle Avenue pedestrian plaza in Brooklyn. The artwork was installed in the plaza earlier this month. I mentioned this to say that I'm very familiar with the city's review and approval process for public art, monuments, and public spaces. I've also done public art commissions in other cities, so I have some basis for comparison. Sustaining communities requires places, public spaces, beyond the home, the workplace, and houses of worship, where conversation is the dominant activity, and a wide range of people, including regulars, casual drop-ins, and relative strangers who congregate. Public spaces, sometimes named to honor a person, and the usual home for monuments and public art, at once belonged to no one, and as I know you've all heard at these hearings, belong to everyone. Cultural and social relationships created in public spaces help us sustain our sense of community, decency, and our respect for diversity. The effectiveness of these spaces in this regard are influenced by its name, its design, its artwork, its markers, and its monuments. If we are to address the issues that are being highlighted at these hearings, we must reform the review process for markers that commemorate public spaces and public art, as the process is fundamentally flawed. My Myrtle Avenue Public Art Project and the design for the plaza itself, for example, required the approval of a community board, a bid, a half a dozen departments and 2 city agencies, 3 city agency commissioners, and ultimately the Public Design Commission. The review process is onerous, expensive, and at times Kafkaesque. The process doesn't nurture the most innovative, forward-thinking, well-considered decisions. I hope the advisory committee's advice to the mayor includes a recommendation for reforming the structure for reviewing and approving parks, open spaces, streetscapes, art, commemorative, and other historic markers. Because without a new process, it will be extremely difficult to address the complex, nuanced, emotion-laden issues that are the focus of this hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Marina.
Yes, my name is Marina Ortiz, and I'm here on behalf of East Harlem Preservation. I'm also a member of the Coalition to remove the J. Marion Sims statue. East Harlem Preservation has been demanding the removal of the J. Marion Sims statue for over 7 years because we believe that a monument honoring a white Southern doctor who experimented on black female slaves without anesthesia or consent does not belong in our community. Our campaign was greatly inspired by earlier efforts by activist Viola Plummer, who began calling attention to Sims' cruel experiments soon after the publication of Harriet Washington's book, Medical Apartheid, in 2006. Since 2010, East Harlem Preservation has sponsored petition drives and public forums. We've also engaged in direct actions with local performance artists, community residents, and members of the New York City chapter of Black Youth Project 100. We maintain that the statue's presence does a huge disservice to our neighborhood's majority Black and Latino residents, groups that have historically been subjected to medical experimentation without permission or regard for their well-being. The debate surrounding the removal of symbols of hate and injustice is certainly not new, although it is certainly broadened to the point where it is no longer a matter of censorship or removing art for content, which was the previous administration's position. We are pleased that Mayor de Blasio has responded to the growing controversy by announcing the formation of this commission. But we've been waiting over 7 years, and we can't be patient any longer. We want the statue removed, and we want it down now. We hope that Mayor de Blasio and members of the commission will join over 20,000 people who have endorsed this campaign, now more than ever as the nation undergoes the erosion of our fundamental rights. It is imperative that New York City stand firm in its commitment to honor and defend its residents with this simple gesture. Dr. Sims is not our hero. There are many African American and Puerto Rican women and men who have made great medical inroads benefiting our community. Helen Rodriguez-Trias and Rebecca Lee Crumper are just a few examples. These are the sheroes we would prefer that our children learn about as they stroll near Central Park, confident in the understanding that Black lives matter. And since I have a few more seconds, I'm going to take the opportunity to also add my support for the removal of the Columbus statue. While understanding the importance of honoring heritage and history, there are many other Italian Americans that can be honored, and some of them were mentioned: Sacco and Vanzetti, LaGuardia, etc. Christopher, this nation was founded on the violent displacement of people of color, people who were here and people from Africa. And anyone who was instrumental in that formation of society does not deserve to be honored. Thank you. I also have these for you.
Thank you. You could hand this. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is William Chabella. I'm here today representing the 5,000 members of the Italian American Police Officers Society of New Jersey, as well as being a professor of public administration at the College of St. Elizabeth in New Jersey. I thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about this very serious issue, but I think that it's noteworthy that we sit here on the eve of Thanksgiving, that it shows the value that we have such discussions of things that are of this importance in a peaceful venue. I come here today to talk against the changes or the abolishment of the Columbus statue. As an Italian American, and certainly you may ask, why is someone from New Jersey coming making this trip before the holiday to New York? Many Americans, and certainly many Italian Americans, look upon New York as the unofficial capital of the world. And as a leader of an Italian American organization, we look forward to coming each Columbus Day to celebrate our pride, celebrate our heritage, celebrate our service to the nation at that statue on Sunday morning. And it is very important to us to maintain that statue. Statue represents the values that we have been raised with, the values that we serve with. As my colleague and friend, Mr. Gagliardo, mentioned, Italian Americans make up a very large portion of the civil servants that clean, protect, and construct things in the city of New York throughout the country. So very briefly, I thank you for the opportunity to make these remarks. I hope the Commission will move forward in its due diligence.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Okay. Okay. So we have two people that are co-testifying. Deliane Arfel and Jamila Felix, and then the other is Antonio Serna. You guys keep going. You get 6 minutes, but it's going to beep after 3.
Okay.
All right? Okay, so we're going to do the 3, and then because there are 2 of you, that's the interrogation. Go ahead.
Dear committee members, before you stands or sits 2 people who have felt, who have experienced, who have lived, whose mothers have lived, whose mothers' mothers, trans siblings, fathers, communities have lived through and survived everything that has tried to kill us or make us smaller. I, Dwayne Powerful, a queer agender femme whose existence and voice has continuously been disvalued.
And I, Jamila Felix, a Black female survivor of multi-generational trauma, are members of the Black Youth Project 100 New York City chapter, and draw upon the strength of our ancestors to stand in front of you here today to confront the history and current day existence of reproductive oppression and demand reproductive justice. We specifically demand justice in regards to the multiple statues in the city of New York that pay tribute or homage to the people who have harmed, experimented on, or owned Black, Brown, and or Indigenous people. This includes the monument of James Marion Sims that stands at the corner of Fifth Avenue and East 103rd Street. Sims is not the father of modern gynecology as this statute claims. Sims was an unextraordinary man, a title he gave himself in his autobiography, who performed excruciating, painful experiments on Black women and femmes in a makeshift hospital in his own backyard. The true mothers of gynecology are Anarcha, Betsy, Lucy, and the 11 other unarmed Black women and femmes who were subjected to Sims' torture.
White supremacy has no one form or manifestation. It isn't only Confederate flags and statues. This country's foundation, stolen from indigenous people, tilled and built by Black people, use exploitative and violent methods to build a constitution, a democracy that doesn't truly listen to the people most impacted by the harm enacted. Now, when we tell you that we are in pain, when we use these constitutional amendments to exercise our rights to our voice, our body, liberty, and justice, why don't you hear us? Instead, you tell us to pacify our anger, silence our trauma for 90 days. This tells us how much we are not valued, how invisible we are. Sims report operations without anesthesia only on Black people, Black women, and Black people with uteruses, because of the popular notion that Black people have a higher tolerance for pain than whites. And yet, here we are, blatantly perpetuating the same erroneous claims that Sims operated under. There are explicit examples in our history that show that this country has never allowed memorializing of any person or thing that has caused harm to white American people. However, it is silently agreed upon that Black people can and will live with the pain of existing under the memorialization of their oppressors forever.
How can we condemn overt forms of racism and anti-Blackness? How can we sometimes, never, address physical violence against Black people but never address or condemn the emotional violence? Never address generational trauma. When research and equal social framework models have shown us that racism and racial trauma can have a direct impact on racially marginalized people's health. Is there no commitment to health? And if so, whose health do you all prioritize? It's time to look at sexual health advancements. In regards to Sims, his discovery of the treatment of vesical vaginal fistulas was one of many clues. As mentioned before, he had set up a makeshift hospital in his backyard and believed that his use of silver sutures during one of his captives, Americans, surgeries was the reason they did not catch an infection afterwards. He then proceeded to use this method during all future surgeries. He asserted that he had made, perhaps, one of the most important discoveries of the age for the relief of suffering humanity. Through this, he claimed to have healed women's fistulas. However, to this day, none of his claims have ever been proven.
In this context, we need to look at Sims' treatment of vesical vaginal fistulas not only through the lens of the good they may bring some people now, but we must also look at their beginnings as a way to address and heal generational trauma among Black people. We ignore the years of medical experimentation on Black people. We know the history and the story of Henrietta Lacks, the Black woman whose cells were harvested without her knowledge or consent, but how many other stories have been lost, forgotten, and simply ignored?
Taking down memorials, statues, flags is just a step. It isn't the end for this fight for Black liberation. But for Black people, Black women, Black people with uteruses, these monuments are constant reminders that we are disposable and insignificant. The existence of statues like Sims are indications of just what and whom the city of New York stands for.
There have been conversations of allowing the statue to remain and instead inserting plaques literally beneath and around the Sims statue of Black women and people he experimented on. But this is just another reminder that there's this desperate desire and voyeurism of Black pain. This is just another reminder that Black people are unworthy of visibility without the presence of a higher, wider, and more oppressive power. The suggestion of placing a plaque literally beneath the statue represents the role Black people have been forced to endure. Always being below, always being looked down upon, always less than.
We also seem to forget that the fistulas these Black enslaved people had were often results of rape, infections left untreated, poor nutrition, and other consequences of their horrid living conditions. Historians argue that taking down the Sims statue will erase its history, but that history is forever ingrained in our soils, in Black bodies. We can never shake it, we can never forget. The removal of these statues is not in an effort to forget, but in an effort to begin to somewhat heal. However, this process cannot begin until our city recognizes the harm it continues to support and perpetuate.
Our city does not hesitate to spend money on memorializing oppressive figures in history, yet we have yet to see any form of reparations to settle up and recognize one, the Black and brown people whose bodies were used for the development of technologies like Puerto Rican people and the pill, and two, the Black brilliance by way of doulas and midwives whose very birthing techniques have been medicalized and profited off of while they have received nothing. Everyone in this room is alive due to the explicit, blatant, and intrusive use of Black bodies. Everyone in this room owes their life to Black women and femmes.
In closing, we demand the statue of Sims in Central Park be removed. We demand that all Confederate and racist statues in the city of New York are removed. We demand that these statues are replaced with monuments of either the victims, their families, or other forms of reparations. We demand the list of symbols of hate be made public and the listed monuments be removed. We demand that no restrictions be placed on the previous demands like 90-day rules that were acted upon immediately. We demand visibility.
Thank you, Antonio. Hi, my name is Antonio Serna. I'm an artist and cultural worker in New York City. As I listened to the testimonials of the past few days, I noticed that the subject of monuments has stirred up a lot of fear, hate, and misunderstanding. So much so that I feel that from day one, the priority of this commission should have been to educate the people of New York City on the truth about its history, so that it can finally reconcile with its violent past. Without this fundamental work of educating the public, it will come as no surprise that at the end of the day, these monuments to a brutal history remain. In fact, these forces and the specter of dispossession are still with us today, now only justified by the city apparatus of democratically elected and appointed officials privileging for-profit developers over its people. If you look at the population shift on the coastal fronts and the city centers of New York, you will see a mostly white racial majority spreading, and the Black and Latino populations are being pushed further out, where city resources are scarce or into homeless shelters. It is no coincidence that New York City's homeless families now number close to 60,000 and are disproportionately Black and Latino. New York City is by far one of the most diverse cities, but also one of the most segregated. In the summer of 2016, New York City had the chance to do what was right and allow African-American artist Aaron Bell to express his feelings related to the lynching by way of his public monument, Stand Tall, Stand Loud, designed for Riverside Park. Instead, the New York City Parks Department forced him to censor his own work and remove the symbolic noose from his sculpture. For this, I am ashamed of being a New Yorker. I'm ashamed that to this day we do not give the space for people of color to express their own history and concerns, and the means to exercise self-determination in designing their neighborhoods and the monuments in this city. But if there's something that has given me hope today, it's what's happening in cities all across the United States. Today, I am proud that for the cities that have renamed colonial holidays to honor Native Americans. Today, I'm proud to hear that the southern town of Charlottesville has removed 60 monuments and secured $4 million in reparations for African American citizens, 250 which were set aside for an African American Cultural Heritage Center. Today I am proud for the southern state of Mississippi, who with the work of Equal Justice Initiative will open the first ever national monument to the victims of lynching in 2018. 4,000 names will be memorialized in the 6-acre monument. After a presentation on art and activism for the students at Pratt University, a student asked me and the panelists, but don't all lives matter? I explained to him that one way society shows who matters is by erecting monuments. So I asked him to look around, show me the statues for my people, for the Latinx community, for the African Americans, Asian Americans, for women and indigenous people. Then you tell me, do all lives really matter for New York City? Thank you. You're saying to do this one?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So, Shulamit Worden? Nicholas Musa? And Nancy Hayes. Can I say that, are these the cards that I have? Is this the rest of the people that signed up so far?
No.
There's more. Okay, and you are, actually, so if you have testimony, you're supposed to give it to Nadia, and we'll distribute it today. Okay, and you are?
My name is Shirley Warren.
Okay,
Microphone. Microphone.
Okay, good, go ahead.
Thank you to co-chairs Darren Walker and Tom Finkelpaul, and to the members of the Mayoral Advisory Commission on City Art, Monuments, and Markers for allowing me the brief opportunity to speak today. My name is Shulamit Warren-Kluter, Director of Policy and Special Projects for Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer. Like many cities, states, and countries, New York City is discussing how to address monuments and statues with challenging histories and associations in our midst. This conversation is needed and will ultimately bring a greater understanding to how we highlight the role of monuments in public spaces and how we engage with them. The conversation on the presence and impact of monuments has been ongoing for some time. We saw a spike in dialogue following the disturbing gathering of white supremacist and Nazi-affiliated organizations opposing the removal of Charlottesville's Robert E. Lee statue. This is not the only statue with such a troubling legacy, and there are few cities that can avoid confronting these issues. Here in New York City in East Harlem, a coalition of community members, my office, and other neighborhood stakeholders have been debating the presence of the Marion Jason statue and have participated in community-led meetings advocating its removal. How should New York City approach its own reckoning with history? Perhaps we should begin by examining other countries for models on how to present history. Indian cities have taken different approaches with British Raj period statues. Coronation Park in Delhi, India took all of its colonial statues and put them in one park. The public land where these reminders of a painful past now sit has not erased its imperial origins, but rather collected painful symbols of it and then allowed their potency to dissolve. I suggest this commission seek out and research examples from other countries and places, as these may broaden our own perspectives on what our choices might be moving forward. Another idea would be for all statues to include a plaque, perhaps with an accompanying app or website maintained by city sponsorship, providing fuller information about the person or persons depicted in them and their historical context, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Our city does need more statues and monuments that celebrate the contributions of its diverse communities. Our heritage is a city built by waves of immigrants, forming a tapestry of vibrant cultures is one of our greatest strengths. As you may know, Borough President Brewer was deeply involved in working with the Department of Parks and Recreation and other stakeholders to realize the Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony Women's Suffrage Movement Monument. Slated for a 2020 unveiling on the centennial of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, the monument will stand on the Mall in Central Park, and its place on Literary Walk was dedicated in a ceremony earlier this month. The monument will be the first figurative piece depicting real women in Central Park, and will be the park's first commemorative sculpture installation since 1965. Our statues and monuments must include more women and more people of color, and we should look to public-private partnerships to expand statues and monuments beyond our city's parks to include placements in pedestrian plazas and city-regulated, privately owned public spaces, otherwise known as ponds. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good morning. My name is Nicholas Miazov. I'm a professor at NYU. I teach in media, culture, and communication, and I write about politics and visual media. So this is very much central to my area of concern. And I want to speak to you specifically about the Theodore Roosevelt Monument that's outside the American Museum of Natural History. So I've done research on this. And I want to speak about it very specifically to say to you that this is not simply something that refers to racism, it incarnates racism. It incarnates a theory of racial superiority that is visible and cannot be explained away. Visual media impact us far more quickly than a lengthy text, as you're experiencing this morning, right? The length of time it takes to explain something compared to the visual impact. Roosevelt died in 1919. Immediately, the director of the American Museum of Natural History, Henry Fairfield Osborne, proposed a monument and memorial that was opened in 1936, and the statue was inaugurated in 1939. Osborne was a believer in what he called Nordic supremacy, and this theory also entailed the potential decline of white dominance unless immigration was to be controlled. And these are ideas that are far from departed from our national scene, as we know. The American Museum of Natural History becomes instrumental to Osborne's policy of eugenics. They hosted the International Congress of Eugenics in 1921. It proposed restrictions on immigration, and in fact opened a whole wing of the museum called the Hall of Public Health, which was designed to promote eugenics and to control immigration. Now, the equestrian monument, which is outside to this day, visualizes Osborne's belief in racial supremacy through the now discredited so-called science of craniometry. This is measuring skulls. And the idea here is then that the perfect skull has a vertical forehead, which is extremely hard to find in an actual human being. So what they did was suggest that you would find it in Greek statues. So in the United States, there's a very widely disseminated idea in a book that's called Indigenous Races of the Earth that claims that there are separate, distinct human races visible in their different skull shapes. So a statue is not a depiction of a racist idea, it is a racist idea. In the equestrian monument, Roosevelt's skull is close to vertical, while the African figure has a sloping forehead and the Indian the most sloped of all. And the very word, the unfortunate racist term slopehead, indicates that this false claim of cranial angle still influences present-day racist caricature, most often applied now bizarrely to people of Asian descent. You can see it in the movie Pulp Fiction, amongst other places. So it's not a question that people at that time had bad ideas and that we censure the monument for that, but that it actively visualizes racial stereotypes. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy.
Hi, my name is Nancy Kager, and I'm a citizen of New York, interested in this topic. Building on, as a PS to the comments of my neighbor here, a week or two ago there was an interview on the radio with an African-American man who had brought his two sons to the Museum of Natural History. Looking at the statue, one of them said to his father, "How come he gets to ride the horse?" So these statues have meaning, and I think maybe it would be helpful to make some kind of distinction between the function of a public park and a museum. Where do people go in order to be educated? Where do they go in order to enjoy nature, picnics, bird watching, whatever they do, without fear of encountering something that is going to be painful or offensive to them because of their particular heritage? So I guess very simply, I would be in favor of removing all of the statues of the type that were described as the gigantic person that you look up to who's a symbol of power, and replacing them with artworks, with sculpture. I live in the West Village, and in my neighborhood, in the Hudson River Park, there's wonderful sculpture, not one offensive figure. And I feel that there are teachable moments from many of the sculptures that have been described here, and I think that there ought to be places where that teaching can happen, but I think there should be places where we can escape from things that are offensive, and especially in such a multi-ethnic city, it's going to be hard to find any figures that are not going to be bothersome to somebody. So I guess that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next panel is Marianne Nicosia, Todd Klein, and Al Snyder.
Could I email you can submit information through our online survey.
So we're going to see two more panels. We have quite a few more people. We're going to get to everybody. And we're going to then take a quick 10-minute break right around. Okay, Marianne.
I'm here to say no, you cannot remove the statues of Columbus. You Americans cannot disregard the history my mom learned at school when she was a secondary student at Dominican Republic. My mom would say, you Americans are ignorant about the historical facts about historical Columbus and the voyage of the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. The truth is, you can't compare Columbus to Adolf Hitler, Osama bin Laden, Jack the Ripper, Charles Manson, Ted Bundy, and Nathaniel Gordon, the slave trader. You Americans don't know the history my mom learned at school when she was a secondary student at Dominican Republic. Yesterday, I was at Brooklyn, and yesterday, what I felt was most important to say was, you Americans don't know that my Hispanic mother from Dominican Republic thinks that Christopher Columbus is a hero. But everyone today should know that my mother, Rosa Celeste Valerio Nicosia, thinks that Christopher Columbus is a hero. My mom was born June 8, 1939 at Dominican Republic. My mom got her high school diploma at Dominican Republic. My mom came to the USA back in '72 when she was 32 years old. My mom has been a U.S. citizen since 1988, so no, you can't kick her out of the country if you don't like what I have to say. What I was able to say yesterday at Brooklyn was, the reason why my mom can't testify herself is because she's 78 years old and her health is not the best. What I didn't say yesterday was, I wish my mom was here to testify herself. I feel my mom's testimony, it would be most authentic and heartfelt. My testimony doesn't feel good enough. My mom is no vapid North American Latina like me. My mom is the real thing, born and raised from Dominican Republic. My mom is the most Hispanic. I could say you know your mama is a Latina when she has read the El Diario newspaper, watches Casa Cerrado, knows who is Julio Iglesias, but loves Mark Anthony. Hey, you know you're a North American Latina like me if you've gone to a Norwegian party and have danced to merengue music. Maybe I should be a funny girl and say screw Columbus. Mama didn't make me rich and famous like J-Lo, but I am here to say, I love you, Mom. Everyone should know that my mother, Rosa Celeste Valeria Nicosia, thinks that Christopher Columbus is a hero. Peace.
Thank you. Next is Todd. Todd, yes?
Yes. Hello, my name is Todd Fine. I'm the president of the Washington Street Historical Society, which is an organization dedicated to the Little Syria neighborhood in Lower Manhattan. I'm also a PhD student in history at the Graduate Center. And some people may know, some people may not know, the city has approved the monument memorial to the writers of Little Syria, which include Khalil Gibran and Imran, just a few blocks from here in Lower Manhattan in the financial district. And this is, I think, a great achievement, and I would like personally to thank Tom Finkelpearl, the head of Cultural Affairs, Mitchell Silver, the head of the Parks Department, and our Mayor Bill de Blasio for approving this memorial and monument. I think it's in dialogue with a lot of the issues that have been discussed today about how do we get new monuments in the city. And our organization, myself, we've been in the trenches of this issue for years now, advocating this memorial. And I do think that it's important that this commission think about the process that people are talking about. How do we make community groups more comfortable in advocating for new monuments and memorials? I don't want to give specific testimony on that, but I think that people involved know that there are issues in making groups feel welcome and ensuring that the memorials they advocate will do justice to the subject. So I think that there should be a positive dimension to this commission as well and how to reform it, but I don't want to give any advice on this. With our memorial, we are, and I am hopeful that something great can be achieved, but we do need your help, all the people here, all the commissioners, to be engaged in what are community groups doing to get new memorials, and how can we ensure that they're done with full justice that's worthy of the subject. You know, the groups need to be empowered. But my testimony is basically about resources for the Parks Department, for Cultural Affairs, to maintain our existing monuments and memorials and to support people to do these things. I think it's very difficult to have a conversation about removing monuments, putting so much focus on all these monuments that we have, where the Parks Department Art Division doesn't have really the resources to maintain its existing monuments, it doesn't have the staff to consider proposals for new monuments. It's kind of, I just feel it's a little absurd in some ways to be focused so much on this old monuments when we're not really supporting the ones we have. And I think the recommendations of this panel are going to be impossible to fulfill without real funding of the Parks Department Art Division and Cultural Affairs. And so I think that the City Council and the Mayor need to, do funding for these agencies if we're going to even have this discussion. And that is part of also our hope with our memorial, that the Parks Department, Cultural Affairs will listen to people like our group more seriously if they feel that they have the resources to take things on. Right now, I think the default position in many cases is we can't do anything because we don't have the money, and New York should not be like that.
Thank you. Cal Snyder.
Yes, good morning. I want to thank the Commission for the opportunity to testify. My name is Cal Snyder. I'm a historian of New York's cultural and military history, affiliated with the New York Historical Society since 2006, leading walks to many of the city's monuments, and teaching seminars for public school teachers on the use of monuments for instruction in art, in architecture, and history. I authored Out of Fire and Valor, the only comprehensive survey of the city's war memorials from the Revolution to the present. I question one of the basic premises of the Commission. It's that decisions about historical fact and events and objects, the idea that it should be made by a mayor who has preemptively announce that historical traces of our city's life, which he has personally disapproved of, should be removed. And he has a commission to assist him in doing so. I'm going to cite one example to explain why I believe this goes to the heart of all of the discussion that we've had today. There is a pavement insert on Lower Broadway honoring or denoting the parade given to Pétain, the Marshal of France, in the 1930s. The members of the commission are probably familiar with it. The mayor has already announced that it must be the first to go. Now, this marker does not praise Marshal Pétain. It just, or even denote that he was the hero of Verdun in World War I. It just says that he got a parade on a given date. Like most of those insert strips along Broadway. Now, in World War II, Marshal Pétain became the president of Vichy France. This is because it's very difficult for me. And became responsible for allowing the Nazis to deport 50,000 Jewish children from France to the ovens of Auschwitz. A crime for which neither we nor history should ever forgive him. But he got the parade in the 1930s. It's a historical fact. It doesn't honor him. New York did that. It was New York that honored him. We honored him. And that is a historical fact. And this is the problem that needs to be remembered and reflected upon when we think about all of these memorials that have been debated today. I also want to say in closing that the funding of the Arts and Antiquities section of the Parks Department is a high priority. They have over 3,000 monuments to take care of now, and they have only 2 staff.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me just do this. Okay, I would maybe just apart from the meeting format and say that the mayor did clarify that the marker for Pétain will be one of the first to be reviewed, not the first to be removed. That was clarified later. I just wanted to say that publicly. The next panel is James Kaplan, Glenn Cantave, and Carmine Musumeci. And then we're going to have one more, and then we'll have the or no. Okay, left to right, we have, I'm sorry, you were James, and then Glenn, and then Carmen, is that right? My problem. Yeah, okay, so we'll start with James, we'll go to Mr. Yes.
My name is James Kaplan. I'm the president of the Lower Manhattan Historical Association, which is a civic organization consisting of individuals and members of various historical groups whose purpose is to promote the very rich history of Lower Manhattan and to educate people about the history of Lower Manhattan and events which they may not be aware. In this connection, we have annually organized a celebration in honor of the American victories at the battles of Saratoga and Yorktown in Trinity Churchyard, the commanding generals of which are buried in Trinity Churchyard, Alexander Hamilton and Horatio Gates. We do July 4th parades for the last 3 years, and on next Friday we'll be organizing an evacuation day ceremony and parade starting at Federal Hall and going to the recently renamed Evacuation Day Plaza. For those of you who don't know, Evacuation Day was the day that the American flag was first raised over Lower Manhattan. It was a very important holiday for 120 years. It was forgotten about 100 years ago, but we intend to revive it, and we invite you all to come to our Evacuation Day ceremony on November 24th. In principle, I applaud the creation of the Monuments Committee to the extent that it stimulates and encourages discussion about the city's history and important individuals, which I believe there is, in many ways, cases of woeful lack of understanding. However, I believe the focus, if it is the focus of the Commission, on removing monuments is in many respects misguided. Many, if not most, of the monuments, including those to Christopher Columbus, were erected over 150 years ago because certain were elected in the past 150 years, because certain civic groups with the city's approval believed they were of importance, and in many ways they are today. I personally believe the Monuments Committee, however, should focus on individuals and events who are of significant historical importance, who are not well known to New Yorkers, and about whom there should be monuments or markers. For example, the catalyst for our Saratoga Yorktown celebration was the marking of the grave of General Horatio Gates, who was one of the, second to Washington, probably the most important Revolutionary War general, but was buried in an unmarked grave in Trinity Churchyard until we marked it, until the Daughters of the American Revolution marked it 5 years ago. Evacuation Day is another example. Evacuation Day was a very important holiday, critical, second only to July 4th, but forgotten 100 years ago, and hopefully now revived. But I believe there are many other places and events which should be marked and which are not. For example, in Lower Manhattan, 29 South William Street, now the Icon Marking Garage near Millennial High School, is the site of the first synagogue in North America. In 1730, when the Mill Street Synagogue was...
Yeah, just if you could just wrap it up. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Four of the monuments is to Frances Perkins. Frances Perkins was probably the most important woman of the 20th century. But there is no monument to her here in New York City because she was... others are in Harlem, the Marcus Garvey site, where Marcus Garvey's Liberty Hall at 130 West 138th Street, where African independence began. And on 135th Street and 7th Avenue, the $1 Million Houses, that broke the back of the attempt to keep blacks out of Harlem and Philip Payton's Afro-American Realty Company. There's no monument to them. These are the things that you should be focusing on and arguing.
Okay, thank you. You can submit your testimony. We can look at those recommendations. Next is Glenn. Yeah, I give it to Nadia or Jeff. And if you could hand the mic over to your... Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Glenn Gontav. I'm the founder and CEO of Movers and Shakers, and our goal is to change how the history books are written and the museums, how they address Black and Brown history using virtual reality, augmented reality, and the creative arts. What I want to speak about here today is values. I'm extremely confused as far as what exactly New York City does value, and the broader context of the United States does value. I'm confused for several reasons, because it doesn't make sense to me that, in terms of the United States, that the only two individuals who are honored at the national holiday are Martin Luther King and Christopher Columbus. One stood for freedom, the other for genocide. I'm also confused by the fact that if you look at the statue of Columbus Circle, if you go a little bit further down by Central Park South, you have monuments of Jose San Martin and Simon Bolivar, two people who liberated from Spanish imperialism. That makes no sense to me as well. If we look at the case of Germany, it's an objective fact that Adolf Hitler was a terrible human being. If we use the logic that's being applied to this fake Columbus narrative that's going along, you can say, that Germany was economically depressed and Hitler helped it become a superpower. And that, they made a lot of money and they became on the map, but the simple fact is that no one glorifies him because he was objectively a terrible person. And they maintain the history so that ideally something like this would never happen again. But In the case of Christopher Columbus, you have someone who, after 25 years, decimated 80% of a population. You have someone who wrote in his own diary that 9 and 10-year-old girls were in high demand. So this is, once again, his own words, a primary source. So my question is, does New York City value terrorism? Does New York City value genocide? Does New York City value pedophilia? I'm asking these questions because this is not just an indigenous issue, it's a Black and Latinx issue as well. The majority of the millions of Black and Latinx people are here because of the compounding effects of the actions of Christopher Columbus. So why do we have to pay tax dollars to support monuments and a narrative that directly contributes to our current day subjugation? Furthermore, I just want to mention that Movers and Shakers held a slave auction this past weekend to protest white supremacy and the Columbus statue specifically. If you want to look at more information, you can look at the Huffington Post main website today. We're on the front page. And we're going to continue pushing forward. We're going to be doing a performance art piece on December 3rd. I invite you to come to see our augmented reality and virtual reality narrative based on academically justifiable evidence, rather than what a lot of what you're hearing is feeling and tradition versus objective fact. The objective fact is that my people are victims of terrorism, and if New York City is one of the hotbeds of terrorism, why are we promoting that as a value? Thank you.
Thank you. Carmen.
Good afternoon. My name is Carmine Musumeci. I am an attorney. I live here in Manhattan, but even more so, I was raised 7 blocks from here in Alfred E. Smith projects. My grandparents immigrated here 110 years ago from Sicily, and they lived on Monroe Street in the what was referred to by Robert Moses as the slums of the Lower East Side. We never regarded it as slums. We regarded it as home. And home was something that got taken away from us during urban renewal. But I digress a little bit. I'm a national director of the Knights of Columbus, an organization which bears the name Columbus. Proudly, 135 years ago, an immigrant priest in New Haven chose the name of Columbus because he served the immigrant community of New Haven, the immigrant community that was beset upon by many people in America by saying, Irish need not apply, Italians need not apply. Yes, that was the America of the 1880s. Only 10 blocks from here is the original Cathedral of St. Patrick's, which the ancient order of Hibernians had to protect from being burnt down by the Know-Nothing Party. Yes, that was the 1880s. Fast forward a little bit to the 1920s, when the Ku Klux Klan mounted a national campaign against Columbus. A national campaign to eradicate Columbus, not because Columbus discovered America, but because Columbus was the source of immigration, of freedom for a lot of people in the world to come here, and because he was Catholic. And this eradication of Catholic schools was a primary goal of the Ku Klux Klan. It is ironic that a number of people want to eradicate the Columbus memory now, find themselves in the company of the Ku Klux Klan. Yes, please, totally ironic. Welcome to America. Welcome to America, as my grandparents heard. Welcome to America, learn English, and welcome to America. You having a good time?
Please, let's
I think I gave you a lot more respect than you're giving me right now.
You sound the same. Please, come on, let's have one person speak at a time, if you would like to continue.
Okay. I think you should be well aware of the fact that eradicating Columbus as a loyal son of Italian descent is an insult, a disrespect to my grandparents, to my parents, and an insult to my children who still live here in Manhattan. Yes, we are now 4 generations here. We chose to live here. We want to live here, but we're afraid to live here now because our American values, our heritage is being attacked. Yes, I think that the days of freedom for us may be questioned by the affront that is now being mounted against Columbus in the name of some sort of nouveau historical bent. It is not something new that Columbus's history has been beset by lies and other slanders. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. All right, so we're going to just take a break to stretch our legs a little bit. If anybody needs to rush off to the restrooms, and then we're going to continue again in about 10 minutes, okay? seats, allowing everyone to start. We can have the commissioners come back up to the top. Can people take their seats, please? Take your seats, please. Okay. Do you have any commissioners who are out there somewhere? So I wanted actually to just start off the second half by reminding people that if you can't stay, there is the opportunity to testify essentially online by going to our online portal. So if you have to run out, that is okay, and that is nyc.gov/monumentscommission. All right, and we'll get started even that. Okay, so the next panel, and we're gonna, we have quite a few people more, probably a couple more hours of testimony. We will have to get out of this room at some point, but we have some time. So Angelo Vivolo, Vincent Tomeo, and William Donahue are the next three. Please come up. Are you Vincent? Yes. Okay. Hold on, let's wait 1 second for Mabel to take her seat. Okay, thanks everybody. And Vincent, you are up. Thank you. Go ahead. Yes. Yes. Yes, you are.
Thank you. Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm here today as a New Yorker and a proud Italian American. I also stand before you as the 14th president of the Columbus Citizens Foundation, a cultural and philanthropic non-for-profit institution that provides over 700 annual scholarships to students in need and oversees New York City's annual Columbus Day Parade of Fifth Avenue. Most recently and most relevant to these meetings, I have been working with more than 50 leaders in the Italian American community as we stand together, as we face down the cultural debate which could label Columbus as nothing more than a historical villain, and the physical defacing of Columbus statues and monuments throughout New York, which, with all due respect to those present today from the Mayor's Commission, are directly linked to the polarizing discussion of statues and monuments, which began in September with a direct critique on Columbus by the Speaker of the City Council. Over the years, Columbus Day and the Columbus Monument have played a vital role in Italian American acceptance and the celebration of Italian culture. The statue of Columbus at Columbus Circle was created by renowned Italian sculptor Gaetano Rosso in 1892 and founded by Italian immigrants to the newspaper sales. In fact, many of the statues on Columbus were financed by Italian Americans. Though it is not often discussed, the Italians who came to New York and other destinations in the 1800s were met with intense discrimination and in many cases extreme violence, and not the least of which was the largest mass lynching in United States history, which took place on March 14, 1891, with 11 Italian workers acquitted by a jury but lynched by a mob organized by the mayor of New Orleans. It is against this background of discrimination that we as Italian Americans embrace the figure of Columbus, and as a result, these statues often financed by our ancestors. It's an emotional and historical significance to the community that I am so proud to belong to. I'm an Italian American, and I am also a New Yorker, and the New Yorker in me celebrates and cherishes the great diversity of the city that we share. I support and applaud the efforts of more recognition for indigenous people of the Americas, and particularly for those tribes from the New York State area. Indigenous culture must and will be celebrated, but as a proud Italian American, I cannot accept that the celebration of indigenous people will require the erasing of Columbus and the history of Columbus in America. No government agency or commission should determine what we as citizens should believe. Every citizen has the right to determine their own beliefs and make their own educated judgment of Columbus. There should be no plaques or kiosks with a revisionist view on the statue. Our rights as American citizens living in a free country must be respected. The Statue of Columbus must remain with no alteration or additions. They should be untouched by vandals and allow all of us citizens in a free country to make our own conclusions about the man that they represent. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. And you are next. You are William or Angela?
No, I'm Vincent Tomio.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. You're Vincent
Tomio.
Yes, Vincent. Sorry.
Hello. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for attending. Now, I don't know if that's politically correct, but excuse me, because I never know what to say anymore because I'm using the same word and do not all have the same meaning. And I hope that that's what this commission is here for, so that we could write history and at the same time include everyone. Well, whose history is it anyway? I was a teacher for 36 years, 32 years in New York Public High School, and 2 years at Yeshiva High School, Queens, and 2 years at the Department of Records. I worked with Ken Burns on the Substitute Relief Committee of the Civil War, and I learned a great deal that I didn't know through primary documents, searching for the truth. I worked with Dr. Leah Hershkowitz from Queens College, who is a New York historian who wrote several books on the contribution and history of Jews in New York City. Dr. Leah Hershkowitz was instrumental in salvaging documents from archives up in the Bronx, and we had the historical documents collection at Queens College. Well, it is difficult for all of us because I hope that we're all searching for the truth and that we speak with our minds and not with our hearts, because sometimes emotion can be sloppy. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this is your job to come up with a definition of what is history. History has been interpreted by many people in many different ways. When I was a teacher, I tried to teach through conflicting interpretations. I could go on. I just want to say, here's a work of art by Degas. It's a ballerina and dancers, and I admire that work.